The Birth Visitor by Zhou Dedong. My childhood was oppressive. For most of the time in Heilong Town, there was no electricity. After dark, little pools of oil lamp light would bloom here and there. Back then, my friends and I were out in the dirt, playing to our heart's content, our faces slick with sweat when my mother's thin, sharp voice would ring out, "Dongzi, time for bed." When I think of that distant scene now, I feel both happiness and sorrow. When I got home, the house was pitch black. To keep mosquitoes from flying in, everyone would put out the lamps early. Of course, the main reason was to save lamp oil. The long darkness gave my imagination an unusual strength. I would lie there in the dark, listening. The chickens packed tightly in their coop slept standing up. Now and then one would mutter vaguely, as if it had stepped on another's foot. The lazy pigs snorted in the pen. The listless dog barked once. A bubble rose in the pickled cabbage jar. Some insect thrashed its wings against the window. The roof beams seemed unable to bear the pressure any longer, and let out a groan. From some neighbor's house came a clear, distinct snore. Some faraway person shouted something. When I was 7 one night, I rummaged through an old trunk at home and found a stack of yellowed photographs. I looked at them by lamplight. The oil lamp blinked tiredly in the heavy darkness, and the smell of lamp oil stung my nose. Most of them were old black and white photographs, already faded yellow. I didn't know anyone in them. The era, the place, the people, the clothes, the expressions, everything looked ancient. "This is your granddad," my mother said. The old man in the photo wore a black jacket and black trousers. He sat upright, his face stiff and emotionless. "Isn't this my granddad?" My mother thought for a moment, as if she didn't know how to explain it to me. My father cut in, "That's your real granddad." I half understood and kept turning the photos over. My mother pointed at another one and said, "This is your maternal grandfather and your maternal grandmother." The maternal grandfather and grandmother in the picture were also dressed in black, their faces stern and cold, as if I had done something wrong, or my parents had. They had been dead for many, many years. I had never met either of them. I was afraid of their eyes. Was this the look they had when they married? That was what I thought then. "Who's this?" I pointed at a photograph and asked my mother. In it was an old woman whose face and expression were somewhat like my grandmother's. "This is your maternal grandfather's cousin," my mother said. Then she turned to my father. "What should Dongzi call her?" My father thought it over and said uncertainly, "Maybe aunt great-grandmother." People in Heilong Town didn't move around much. If they weren't blood relatives, they were in-laws. Near and far relatives branched out like tree roots, and a relative like that great-aunt was, in fact, as thin and faint as water. The reason my family had a photo of her was that country people liked collecting photographs. Relatives, friends, neighbors densely packed into a frame and hung on the wall as decoration. I studied the aunt great-grandmother in the photograph and suddenly felt that the old woman looked familiar, as if I had seen her somewhere. There was an old woman who once gave me an ice pop at the supply and marketing cooperative. Her own ice pops had not sold out, and then it began to rain. No one could possibly buy them now. But it wasn't her. At New Year there would be stilts and dry boat performances, and the drumbeats and gongs were full of joy. I squeezed into the crowd and accidentally bumped into an old woman. She turned and glared at me fiercely. Not her. I had a fever. In the middle of the night, my father carried me to the clinic for an injection. As we walked down the pitch-black corridor, passing the door of a ward, I saw an old woman lying on a filthy bed, her face pale, her eyes full of despair and grief. The nurse said she was going to die, not her. I strained to remember, but in the end I still couldn't. It must have been a memory from a very long time ago, something that once flashed before my eyes. In my 7 years of life, there had been tens of thousands of such scenes. And I could not catch hold of her? "Where is great-aunt now?" I asked. "She died long ago, but I've seen her." My mother froze for a moment. "Where did you see her?" "I can't remember, but I know I did." My mother looked at my father, then at me. Children shouldn't talk nonsense. At night, in the dark, I heard my father and mother speaking in low voices. They thought I was asleep. Half dazed, I felt their voices were terribly secretive. I could tell they were talking about me. Far away, a child was crying faintly, the sound unbearably slow and miserable, surely not just because he couldn't find his way home. As I said earlier, I was born at noon, when sunflowers were blooming in a blaze of gold. About half an hour before I was born, while my mother was in the heated bed, calling out in pain. A man was sitting at our doorway and howling his head off. He was a madman. No one knew where he had come from. He was probably in his 30s, his face covered in dust. He wore a tattered cotton jacket and cotton trousers, but there was nothing under them, not even a vest. He was barefoot. his feet chapped and cracked. He cried in utter misery, as if some great tragedy were about to unfold. 2 or 3 passers-by stood beside him watching the spectacle. The midwife quietly told my father that this was bad luck. My father didn't care. "He's just a madman. Ignore him." A young man from next door let his dog loose to bite the madman. Dogs are snobs. One dog charged in, and the dogs from the neighboring houses rushed in too. The few people watching panicked and ran off, while the madman kept howling, not even opening his eyes. Strangely enough, the dogs ignored the madman and instead lunged at the fleeing people. Only after those people had run far away did they turn back and surround the madman. "You bite the cotton jacket, I'll bite the cotton trousers." The madman was pulled to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. He got back up with blood on his face and he cried even more miserably. The dog's frantic barking and the man's wailing mixed together. It must have been heartbreaking. At last, the young man's parents saw what was happening and shouted, "Call the dogs back, someone's going to die in a minute." Only then did the young man run over and drag the dogs back. That dry, desolate howling kept sounding outside the window. The plants at noon were all wilted and drooping, listening in silence. When I was born, I heard it was not easy. The midwife had to use all her strength to drag me out. I cried weakly while she hurried to cut the umbilical cord and wash away the blood. The moment was so tense that no one noticed when the madman's crying stopped. Looking out the window, he was already staggering away. 3 hours later, an old woman walked into our house. By then, the midwife, having finished her task, had left. I was lying in the cradle hung from the beam, one of the 4 oddities of northeast China. When a child is born, hang him up. My mother had fallen into an exhausted sleep. This old woman was great-aunt. Her name was Li Xiangji, and she lived right behind our house. She became the person who stepped over me at birth. There was a saying where I grew up, the first person to visit after a child is born becomes that child's birth visitor, and the child's looks, character, and fate are said to resemble that person exactly. Who knows what dark connection there may be in the unseen world between a birth visitor and a child. It was said that Li Xiangji had become a widow when she was still young and never remarried. But her door remained half open all her life. I only wanted to know this. Would my life ever have as many opportunities as hers? Before I had experienced anything at all, heaven kept its mouth shut. There was one thing she and I had in common. She loved telling scary stories. Her head was full of them. Heilong Town had many scary stories in circulation, and the vast majority came from her. I heard the adults tell some of them, and I still remember them now. They were certainly not stories from strange tales from a Chinese studio, What the Master Does Not Speak Of, Flowers in the Mirror, or a collection of inexplicable tales. I think they were all original creations by Li Xiangji. I have a story called The Invisible Son-in-Law in one of the books in this series, and it was said that she was the first to tell it. She didn't know I had been born. She came to visit our house, and only after she stepped inside did she learn that my mother had already given birth. At the time, my father was cooking for my mother in the outer room. Millet porridge mixed with brown sugar and boiled eggs. My mother was asleep. Sui Jingyun had the baby, my father said. He spoke loudly, because Li Xiangji's hearing was poor. My mother's name was Sui Jingyun. Really, boy or girl, people with bad hearing always spoke loudly. They thought others couldn't hear them. A boy. Let me see. As she spoke, Li Xiangji shuffled into the inner room in tiny steps. She went in, and soon came back out. Judging from the time, she probably only leaned in to glance at me in my swaddling clothes, as he ladled out the porridge. My father said loudly, "Go on in and sit for a while. I'm heading back. Take good care of Sui Jingyun." When she reached the doorway, she turned and added in a loud voice, "Zhou Xianchun, your kid's eyes are black and bright, and he's still looking at me." That was the last thing she ever said to my father. That very night she passed away. The power was out that night. Her niece Songsheng, who had come from out of town to visit her, was staying at her house. Songsheng was a student at Heilongjiang Agricultural University. When Li Xiangji died, she was talking with Songsheng on the Kang. Li Xiangji had actually been in pretty good health and looked as though she could easily live another 10 or 8 years. Her death prompted many sighs from the people of Heilong about life and death. When I grew up, I met Songsheng once in 1990 after I was discharged from the army and returned to Heilong Town. She told me some details about Li Xiangji's final moments. She said that Li Xiangji had even mentioned me then. That kid from the Zhou family has black bright eyes too, and he's still looking at me. About half an hour before Li Xiangji died, Songsheng heard someone laugh outside the window. It startled her badly. That laugh was not something made up. It was like a wave of wind lifting a spray of water, natural and spontaneous, as if some sudden joy had burst out uncontrollably. Songsheng asked softly, "Aunt, who's laughing outside the window?" Li Xiangji looked at her and asked loudly, "What did you say?" The person outside the window laughed again. The sound was neither loud nor soft, just enough for Song Sheng to hear, while Li Xiangji could not. Someone's laughing. Song Sheng was frightened. Someone's calling. Li Xiangji's voice grew even louder. From Li Xiangji's words, the person outside the window could certainly tell what Song Sheng had said, and even gauge how frightened she was. He laughed again, still neither loud nor soft, still faint. Song Sheng's legs went weak. Li Xiangji was her only support, so she pressed herself tightly against her and said nothing more, staring at the dark window. She had not expected Li Xiangji's head to suddenly droop soft and limp. In a feeble voice, she said, "Why am I so sleepy?" Song Sheng was still staring outside and whispered, "And then lie down and sleep." Li Xiangji didn't move. Her head pressed solidly against Song Sheng's shoulder, and she fell into a dazed sleep. The laughter vanished, or perhaps the one laughing had already walked in through the door. After a while, Song Sheng felt something was wrong. She moved her shoulder gently and called, "Aunt." Li Xiangji toppled stiffly onto the kang like a dry piece of wood. Song Sheng jumped up at once and staggered out of the room shouting, "Help!" A human shadow slowly walked out of the courtyard. He was wearing a tattered cotton jacket and cotton trousers. Li Xiangji died of cerebral thrombosis. Li Xiangji died on the very day I was born. That was pure coincidence. I think that when I die, countless people will also be born. There is nothing strange about that. Even now, I still cannot understand this. Why did her photograph feel so familiar to me? I know readers are only afraid of the plot of a horror story, not of another person's fear. But I am afraid. That feeling is like a pebble trapped in my shoe, quietly grinding at me, gnawing at me, cursing me all the while. I have to pour it out. And never assume that this has nothing to do with you. From a materialist point of view, all things are interconnected. I only saw Li Xiangji once, a few hours after I was born, and a few hours before she died. She leaned in and looked once at me in the swaddling clothes. Maybe she even made a strange expression, or maybe I made a strange expression at her. Only the mirror that once hung on my family's wall knew for sure. But that mirror has already been shattered. She and I brushed past each other at the gate between life and death and looked at one another. Then she and I each went our own way. Just one glance. So many years have passed, and yet I still remember this woman's face with perfect clarity. It is like when you close your eyes and think of yourself, and a blurry image appears in your mind. The image is familiar, but no matter how hard you try, you cannot remember when or where this blurry version of you was fixed in your memory, or whether it is the sum of countless memories from mirrors, photographs, and videos. So now does Li Xiangji still remember what I looked like? I think this is the most terrifying story she left behind. The end.